Goblin launch detected.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. They've got an amazing loyalty program and an easy-to-use and robust buy list. And if you use the promo code MTGMudsta, your first purchase of MTG sealed and singles will be 5% off. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. In today's game, Fred, Corwin, and Mika have joined me. Today I am playing my brand new Brenard deck, keeping Brushland, Altar of Dementia, Wispmare, Sea of Clouds, Canopy Vista, Sol Ring, and a Forbidden Orchard. Fred has also got a new deck with Éowyn Shield Maiden, keeping Boromir, Warden of the Tower, Greymond, Avacyn Stewart, Counterspell, Reflecting Pool, Gilrayan, Dunedain Protector, Recruiter of the Guard, and an island. Corwin's gone a little nuts, and he's playing his Chatterfang deck, keeping Culling Ritual, High Market, Forest, Verdant Catacombs, Tireless Provisioner, Scoot Swarm, and Damnation. The ever-enchanting Mika is playing his Go-Shintai deck, keeping Xander's Lounge, Island, Replenish, Hollowed Fountain, Eidolon of Blossoms, The Eldest Reborn, and Spara's Headquarters. I win the die roll and start us off. I draw and play a Canopy Vista. Fred just plays a Plains. Corwin draws, playing a Forest, and passing. Mika plays a tap Spara's Headquarters and passes back to me. Turn 2 is pretty quick for everybody, and I start us off by playing a Brushland. Fred draws and plays an Island. Corwin draws, playing High Market. Mika just plays a tap Xander's Lounge. For turn 3, I play Sea of Clouds, and then cast Sol Ring and pass. Fred plays a Sulphur Falls, and then casts Recruiter of the Guard. As it comes in, he tutors for Magus of the Moon, and passes to Corwin. Corwin draws and plays a Swamp. He plays out a Tireless Provisioner, and passes to Mika. Mika just plays a tapped Hollowed Fountain. I draw and play Forbidden Orchard. I then cast Brenard, and then cast Altar of Dementia, giving Corwin a Spirit token with the Orchard. I then pass to Fred. Fred plays a Reflecting Pool, and then taps 3 to cast Fate Spinner. Corwin chooses to skip combat, and then draws for turn. He plays Chatterfang, and then plays out Verdant Catacombs, making a treasure and a squirrel token. He then cracks the Catacombs for a Bayou, and gets another treasure and another squirrel token, and then pays enough for Jaheira. After that, Corwin passes, and during his end step, Mika cycles an irrigated farmland. Mika skips combat as well, and draws. He plays a Timber Crown Pathway, and then casts Sol Ring. He then casts Go-Shintai, which makes a shrine as it comes in. Mika then passes to me. I also skip combat, and draw, and then evoke Muldrifter. With the evoke trigger on the stack, I sacrifice it to Altar of Dementia, milling Corwin for 2, and the Muldrifter then comes back as a 1/1 food golem. I draw a total of 4 cards from my 2 Muldrifter triggers, and once that's done, I cast Cultivate to go and find a basic and not be completely blown up by the Magus of the Moon. I find a Forest to play and an Island to hand, which I then play for turn, and pass to Fred. Fred draws and plays Brainstorm, but isn't able to find another land and has to pass. Corwin skips combat on his turn and draws. He plays a Forest and makes a treasure and a squirrel token, and then casts Grist. Corwin then uptakes Grist to make an insect token and a squirrel token with it, and passes to Mika. Mika skips combat as well and draws. He then casts Honden of Seeing Winds, making another shrine, and passing to me. I skipped combat on my turn, and then draw and play a Prairie Stream. I then evoke a Wave Sifter, doing the same trick I did with the Muldrifter, but this time milling Mika for 3. The Wave Sifter then comes back as a food token, and I get a total of 4 clues off of it, and then pass to Fred. Fred draws and plays Keeper of the Accord, passing to Corwin. Corwin skips combat and draws. He then casts a Scoot Swarm, and after that, plays an Undergrowth Stadium, making a treasure token and a Scoot Swarm token, not to mention 2 more squirrel tokens from Chatterfang. And then casts Squirrel's Nest on his swamp. After that, Corwin passes, and Fred gets a Plains from the Keeper of the Accord trigger during Corwin's end step. Mika skips combat and plays a Swamp. He then casts a Doomwake Giant, and Corwin responds by tapping the Squirrel Nest in response to make 2 squirrel tokens. Corwin then sacrifices 6 squirrel tokens to kill the Doomwake Giant with the trigger on the stack, but the trigger still resolves and wipes away the remaining squirrels and scoots. Mika then follows it up with Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest, and then passes. During his end step, Fred gets to go and find another Plains, and I decide to sacrifice 2 clue tokens to draw 2 cards. I choose to skip my combat step, drawing for turn, and then playing Birthing Pod and paying the Phyrexian mana cost in its cost. I then give Fred a Spirit off of my orchard, as I cast Ishtakik, and make a 3/3 Golem with it as it comes in. I then immediately pot him away, and he comes back as a Food Golem himself and makes another 3/3 Golem token. I then get to tutor for Osier Tack. With nothing else, I pass to Fred, who finds yet another Plains off the Keeper of the Accord. Fred draws and finally slams out that Magus of the Moon. He follows it up with Boromir, and then passes after that. Corwin skips combat and draws. He taps a squirrel token for green, and sacrifices a treasure for black to cast Culling Ritual. In response, I start sacrificing some creatures to the Altar of Dementia, milling Fred for 12 and Corwin for 7. The Culling Ritual then resolves, with Corwin getting 9 mana from it. He then plays Ancient Tomb, and then upticks Grist for an insect token and a squirrel token. He's got nothing to do with all that mana though, and just has to let it go, and passes to Mika. Mika skips combat, and draws 2 from his shrines, and then draws 1 for his turn. He then makes 2 white mana from one of the shrines, and uses it to help cast Replenish, bringing back all of his enchantments. He gets Humility, Doomwake Giant, and the Go-Shintai, but there's no triggers because of Humility. Mika then follows up with Collective Restraint, having Domain completely active, and passes turn. I draw and play a Breeding Pool, which I have come in tapped. I then cast a 1/1 Samwise Gamgee, and then a Kutzil, and with everything locked under Humility, I pass to Fred. Fred draws and plays Éowyn, who's also a 1/1, and with nothing else, he passes. Corwin draws and plays a Woodland Cemetery, and upticks Grist. He then passes after that. Mika draws 3 from the Honden, and then draws for turn. He then makes 3 mana from his other shrine, and plays and cracks a Marsh Flats for a Plains. Mika then follows it up with Sanctum of Shattered Heights, and then a Honden of Life's Web. After that, Mika passes, and during his end step, Fred destroys the Humility. I skip my draw step off the Fate Stealer and go to my main phase. I then pot away Kutzil, which comes back as a Food Golem token, and I get some extra copies of it with Osier Pack, but they all die to the Legendary rule. I find a Solemn Simulacrum, which as it comes in, gets me the last basic I need to get out from underneath the Magus of the Moons with the Plains. I also get a food token from Sam. After that, I pass, and Fred gets a Plains from his Keeper. Fred draws and plays a Steam Vents, which is just a mountain from the Magus of the Moon. He then plays Jessica's Will, and Corwin's responds by killing Éowyn with Chatterfang. Fred still gets both modes of Jessica's Will though, getting 7 red and exiling his top 3. He uses the 3 red to help cast Rising of the Day, and then the remaining to recast Éowyn. Fred then plays an Arcane Signet from exile, and passes, with Mika discarding a Shrine to the Sanctum of Shattered Heights to do enough damage to take out Grist. Corwin skips combat and draws. He taps his Swamp to make 2 squirrels, and then sacrifices a treasure for black and his 2 squirrel tokens to take out the Magus of the Moon with Chatterfang. With his mana unlocked, Corwin then casts a Ruthless Technomancer, and as it comes in, with the trigger on the stack, Mika discards another shrine and takes out the Technomancer. Corwin then decides to sacrifice nothing to the trigger and just plays a Damnation instead, wiping the board. Fred responds to this, sacrificing Boromir to save his board, and has the ring tempt him. I also get in on this, casting a Chroma's Will to give my board everything basically, and with nothing else, Corwin passes. Mika skips combat, draws 4, and makes 4 spirit tokens from his Hondens, and then draws for turn. He then makes 4 mana off of his shrine in his main phase, and plays Path of Ancestry. Mika then used floating mana to recast Go-Shintai, and then plays an Academy Rector, and then a Sanctum of Tranquil Light. With nothing else, Mika passes. I skip my draw step, and evoke Whispermare. As it comes in, I destroy the Collective Restraint, and it then comes back as 3 Food Golem tokens thanks to Ogier Attack and Brenard. I hit the Squirrel's Nest, the Honden of Seeing Winds, and the Sanctum of Shattered Heights with the tokens as they enter. I then sacrifice the Solemn Simulacrum, which also comes back as 3 Food Golem tokens, and I get to draw a card from the first one dying, and then find 3 basics as the tokens come in. And after all that, I finally resolve the Birthing Pod trigger, tutoring out a Rootwire Amalgam. With it on the field, I then activate its ability and get to make 3 21/21 tokens. And since I sacrificed it, I get to make 3 more Rootwire Amalgam tokens. Moving to combat, I swing at the 21/21 tokens at Mika, and Kutzel and Brenard go at Corwin. Mika blocks 12 points of damage, but still dies to the trample, and Corwin takes his hit as well. With the Shrine's player taken out, I pass, and Fred gets another Plains from the Keeper, as well as a Soldier token, and we move to his turn. Fred draws and plays a Verge Rangers. He then goes to combat, swinging Éowyn at Corwin and draws a card. Corwin takes the hit, and after combat, Fred then plays Ponder to dig for an answer. He then casts a Wrath of God, and I respond with Pact of Negation. But Fred's ready with a counterspell in response. The Wrath then resolves, and I get Ogier Attack back as a land, and Sam comes back as a Food Golem, and with nothing else, Fred passes. Corwin draws and plays a Forest. He recasts Chatterfang and passes. During his end step, I use Samwise' ability to sacrifice 3 food tokens and return Sol Ring to my hand. I draw and play Jaheira, and then Urza, Lord High Artificer. He comes in and makes a Construct token, and I then follow up by casting Sol Ring. I then activate Urza, and after shuffling, reveal useless plains off the top. I then go to combat, and poke Fred for 1 with Sam, and then pass turn. During my end step, Fred casts Enlightened Tutor and goes to find a Vanquisher's Banner. Fred draws and plays the banner, and I respond by countering it with Dovin's Veto. Fred then plays Greymund, Avacyn's Stalwart, aka Rick for the more cultured folks, and goes to combat. He swings Greymund at me, and I take the hit, and he passes after that. Corwin draws and swings Chatterfang at me for 3, which I also take. I draw and recast Brenard. I then pot away Jaheira, which comes back as a food token, and I get Curiosity Crafter. I then move to combat, and swing Sam at Corwin and the Construct token at Fred. Fred jumps with a Spood token that he'd gotten off the Forbidden Orchard like a traitor, and Corwin takes the 1, which lets me draw a card from the Curiosity Crafter. I then give Fred another Spirit token with the Orchard because I haven't learned, casting Greater Good, and passing to Fred. Fred draws and plays an island. He then recasts Éowyn, and I respond by mana draining her. With no good attacks, Fred just passes turn. Corwin draws and plays a Treasure Vault. He then sacrifices it, putting 5 into the X, and making 5 treasure tokens and 5 squirrel tokens. He then passes, and during his end step, I sacrifice the Curiosity Crafter to Greater Good, drawing 3 and discarding 3, and the crafter gets exiled and comes back as a Food Golem token. I draw and cast Cyberdrive Awakener. This makes all of my non-creature artifacts into 4/4s, and gives all of my artifact creatures flying. I then sacrifice the Awakener away, going to find a displaced dinosaur. I then move to combat and swing lethal at Fred, and with no flyers, he gets taken out. With nothing else, I pass. Corwin draws and casts Night Soil, but I counter it with Swan Song. He gets a bird token and a squirrel token, and then goes to combat. He pumps up Chatterfang for 5, and then hits me with him since it has Forest Walk and I can't block anyway. And then his second main phase casts Earthcraft. I draw and overload Rise and Shine, and with a huge board of gigantic flyers, Corwin knows when he's beat and scoops it up. Game review time. This game was 1 hour, 32 minutes, and 46 seconds. It was a pretty great showing for Brenard, especially considering it's the first time I played the deck. I got to play a lot of the cool cards that I was excited to see, like the Cyberdrive Awakener and the Displaced Dinosaur. The deck played really well, and I enjoyed a lot of the aspects of it, but I was a bit disappointed by the lack of populate in my deck, as I wasn't able to capitalize on the creature tokens. Speaking of creature tokens, Corwin made a lot of squirrels, and I'm really glad that I blew up his squirrel nest after he played that Earthcraft late game. It likely would not have helped him too much in the long run, but it's always scary seeing that combo on the field. Mika's Go-Shintai deck was pretty stacks-ish and kinda control-y. As soon as Humility hit the field, things took a real slowdown, and thanks to Fred he was at least able to deal with it. Speaking of stacks cards, I was really afraid when Fred tutored for that Magus of the Moon with his Éowyn deck. I thought I was going to be completely locked out, but he didn't cast it after finding it because he was running low on lands as well, and didn't want to become public enemy number 1. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.